Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be rating 6 of the different drafts that you guys sent in, talking about the strengths, the weaknesses, how they could be improved, and some of the players that caught my eye as well. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, as per the intro, the aim of today's video is to discuss 6 different drafts sent in by you guys, and thank you so much to everyone that sent in their drafts. There was over 1,000 replies to that tweet that I sent out, so I spent a few hours going through, and I've tried selecting 6 different drafts, each of them with a talking point or a theme. So for example, this first one, it's about going premium in defense, big at the back, and I'll discuss whether I like that structure and that setup, because as much as I will discuss players throughout, I'll discuss each of the players. Like Morgan Rogers is very much back in my thinking. I think at the moment, this far out from game week 1, it's really important to try and think about structure. What structure do you want to set your team up in? Do you want to have a chip active? Which price points do you have in your team? That kind of thing for me is the most critical thing to look at right now. So we're going to discuss all of that today. I'll also be giving each team a Raptor rating out of 100%, and I'll try to explain why I've given it that. And I'll also be giving the Fantasy Football Hub rating. So you guys will know over the last few seasons I've been working with Fantasy Football Hub. They've been very, very supportive of my channel, and I can't thank them enough. I will be doing so for another season. And they have a My Team feature, which will give you a percentage rating out of 100, as well as your predicted points. And they do that for every single game week. And as of pre-season, you can get 50% off if you use the link in the description. To show you how easy that is and what that would look like, I'll just jump over to their site quickly. So when you load up to their site, if you use the link in the description, you'll get to this point where you've got sort of a blank team. It can be a little bit laborious to go through and select all of your players, especially if you want to keep changing your drafts. So they did introduce the import team from FPL screenshot. So, yes, by the way, all of my downloads are just FPL teams. So what I did is I've just grabbed a random team. This isn't a leak, although at one point this was my draft. You literally just select it. It will say fetching and optimizing your team. I mean, literally seconds, a couple of seconds there. The team loads in. And that's it. So this is, again, this isn't my current draft, but this is a variation of a draft. All you do then is save plan. And then what you can do is you press this optimize button, and based on projected points, it sets out the team the way you would like, and it will give you a rating. So this for me is 90%. You can then skip ahead to future weeks as well. So game week 2, you can see my rating isn't as high. If I press optimize though, they'd actually bring Chris Richards into the team. So that would then push my game week rating up slightly. So you can plan for future weeks using this, which is incredibly useful. They have suggested transfers as well. The website's just unbelievable. So not only do you have all of that, you've also got Opta statistics. So if you want to look at statistics for certain players, especially all of the defensive contributions, you can now do that. They've got a fixture analyzer tool. You can change how many game weeks you want to look in advance. You can change based on attack, defense. There's so much player comparison. Price change will eventually be a thing. Player profiles is really useful as well. There's a live match center once the game goes live too. So honestly, there are so many things that you can do with the site. Absolutely the best time to sign up is during pre-season. Use my link in the description because firstly, it really supports me and I do appreciate it, but you'll also get 50% off if you use that link. So yeah, massive thank you to Hub. Let's now go back into that draft and discuss why we're going to be looking at this draft here. So this was sent in by FPL Ezo. Why do I love this? Because I've given it a 91%, and you can see Fantasy Football Hub have given it 93%. When people talk about big at the back, what they mean is you're spending loads of money on your defenders, right? In this setting, at least, anyway. Let's not be sus about it. So we're talking about spending loads of money on the defense, but I feel like sometimes people say, is big at the back, and they show like a 5 at the back with £5-6 million defenders. That's overkill. I'm not spending that much of my budget on the defense because then when you look at the rest of the team, it always looks really weak. This big at the back draft is big at the back, yes, but it's got 3 really good defenders, a really good goalkeeper, and then the rest of the team still looks good. So for those listening on audio, and I do keep forgetting that I'm releasing these on audio. By the way, if you're listening on audio, please do rate 5-star. It's Sells in goal, then Gvardiol, Gabriel, and Cucurella as 3 £6 million defenders at the back. And then listen to the front 7. Salah, Palmer, Rogers, Ndiaye, Solanke, Wood, Welbeck. Do you feel like that is sacrificed at all? Because I don't. You've still got Salah and Palmer. You've still got Rogers at that nice price point. Ndiaye is your cheapest midfielder in your starting 11 at 6.5. You've then got 2 £7.5 million forwards and a 6.5. One of my sort of cliche mottos or sayings on this channel, and you'll hear me say it a lot, if someone sends me a draft, whether it be at the start of the season or a wild card, and my immediate reaction is, how did you afford that? It's always going to have a really high rating from me. I'm always going to really like it. So in terms of what I like, Sells, I think, is a really nice £5 million goalkeeper. I think Arsenal and City defence are always worth investing in. Arsenal at the moment are very underrated. Like, I've not had a lot of Arsenal in my drafts, but I want them. And I think Cucurella is sneaky, arguably up there, again, as one of the best defenders in the game to pick. I really want to try and squeeze him into my team. Not only that, but then, like I say, you've still got that 2 premium structure in midfield. I think Morgan Rogers and Aston Villa, if you go over to Fantasy Football Hub and look at their fixture analyzer, Aston Villa are at the top over the first 8 game weeks. I think, again, Aston Villa might be a team that are being slightly underrated. And then the front 3 are all on penalties and are all pretty nailed. Like, Welbeck's minutes, I think, are slightly more suspect than people are giving them credit for. I don't think he's as nailed as a Wood and Solanke, but that is 3 penalty takers. 2 of them with very good minutes, and then 1 of them, I think, with pretty good minutes. In fact, 6 of the 7 starting attackers are on pens. So, I mean, I could arguably, genuinely, even give this more than a 91%, but I didn't want to be too nice. And the main reason for that is the way that you can afford this is the bench absolutely stinks. It really does, right? So it's got a cheap goalkeeper, a £4 million defender, a £4.5 million midfielder, and then Udogie as the only real backup that you've got there. Now, is this a huge issue? When you look at the players that have been picked, not necessarily. Gvardiol, Gabriel, Cucurella, never getting benched. Look at the 7 attackers, other than maybe Welbeck, and I suppose you could argue at some point Solanke might be, but if you look at those 7 attackers that you've picked, they don't get benched. They're nailed on attackers for their team. So you might not need the bench as much, but you never know when you might need it due to anything that might crop up. You also might want to rotate some of these players out. Like you probably don't want to play Welbeck against the likes of Man City and Chelsea in upcoming games. But also, we do have a bench boost to play. So unless you're planning on playing the bench boost after your first wildcard, which, by the way, perfectly viable strategy, you might come unstuck with such a weak bench. So if it were my team, I'm going to completely defeat the purpose of what this draft is. I would downgrade one of the defenders to a 4.5 or a 5. Even something like, I don't know, Gabriel down to Richards, who I just said I think will be a really, really decent defender. He was in one of my drafts. Or even something like, and the reason I say this is because I've had to start doing it in my drafts because I can't justify going for the other. But you've got Sells and Cucurella here, Sanchez and Nico Williams. And by the way, Williams has attacking threat and he's good for defensive contributions considering he's a fullback. But yeah, Nico Williams and Sanchez versus Sells and Cucurella, that saves you £1 million. Then using that £1 million to upgrade Irving or to upgrade your 5th defender, just to give you a little bit more squad depth, I think that would be worthwhile. But honestly, this is a really strong draft. I do not mind going for a premium defence, but I don't think you want to go overkill. You don't need 4 £6 million defenders or playing a 5 at the back. That feels too much, even with the new defensive contribution points. But going for 3 defenders like that, and still allowing such a strong front 7, if this bench could be upgraded a bit, I'd push it up to sort of a 95, 96%. So let me know what you think of draft number 1. Let's move on to draft number 2. So moving on to draft number 3, we have the Freemium featuring HAALAND. So not only 3 premiums, but it's got Salah, HAALAND and PALMER, the 3 most expensive players in the game. And it's actually still a really strong draft. So all of these drafts today, I've not chosen drafts just for the sake of roasting them that I think are terrible. All 6 of them are viable. Otherwise, there's no real point in showing you. I've given this one an 85% because I do think there are limitations with it, mainly because you're spending so much money on 3 players. But it is still pretty strong. Fantasy Football Hub still have it up at 88%. So they actually don't mind this draft because, again, you've got the 3 arguably best players in the game. So for those on audio, for those that are squinting because the graphic's a bit small, it's Sanchez in goal. So you still have a £5 million goalkeeper. You've then got 3 4.5s. So it is a little bit weak in the defence. So it's Van der Ven, Konsa and Wan-Bissaka. I will just say 2 things. Firstly, there are lots of good 4.5 defenders to pick from. But secondly, because of the defensive contributions now, if defenders do a lots of defensive things, so clearances, blocks, interceptions and tackles, they'll pick up points quite well. And actually, when I look at players like Gabriel and Saliba, they're playing for a fantastic defence. They'll get clean sheet points. Gabriel's got attacking threat. But players like Konsa and Wan-Bissaka are probably more likely to get defensive contribution points because they're playing for teams that will defend slightly more, although Konsa's a bad example. But you see what I mean? £4.5 million defenders and, in particular, centre-backs might end up offering decent value this year if you can try and nail on the right ones. I do think, though, again, players like Chris Richards, trying to have a look at the data, and I'll probably release a video at some point doing a deep dive into this, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see that. But there are certain players that just always have defensive actions. They're probably the ones that you end up wanting to pick. So whilst I think that 4.53 defenders doesn't look great at first glance, we've just looked at a big at the back, we've now got a very small at the back, I still think it could be viable. Then when we move on to the front seven, it looks fantastic, right? So you've got Kudus, Salah, Hudson-Odoi, Ndiaye, and Palmer. So 2 premium midfielders. And then the 3 cheap ones, little bit of a spoiler alert from the upcoming draft. At the moment, I've got this exact midfield 5. And I don't have Haaland. I've just spread the money around a bit more, but I think it's really solid. I think those 2 6.5s are popular for good reason. Obviously, Salah and Palmer are going to keep cropping up because they're fantastic. And then Hudson-Odoi. I think Hudson-Odoi is arguably my favourite midfielder, 6 million and below. And again, I plan on making a video coming up on cheap midfielders. I think he could have a really nice season for Nottingham Forest, and they've got really strong fixtures. And then the front 2 is Haaland and Welbeck. Welbeck again keeps cropping up because there aren't tons of 6.5s. Strand Larsen's the other good one, but because of the fixture in Game Week 1 against City, it's rightly so putting a lot of people off. The only criticism I can have of this team, other than, of course, it having a very, very weak back 3, is, again, there is no bench. But for this one, there is no bench. You've got Obi, so a 4.5 forward, and then you've got 2 £4 million defenders and a £4 million goalkeeper. This, for me, hands down, I will never advise people to go into a season with a bench that weak. I think at the very, very, very least, you need one good £4.5 million defender as backup. That's the very least. Just someone that sits first on your bench that you know they might get you defensive contribution points. They might get you the odd attacking return. Just a very decent 4.5 defender. I also think, if you can, it might be worth upgrading your fifth midfielder from a 4.5 to someone like a Dingra, if you can get there. But at the very least, just have something. So for me, the bench is too weak. The defense is too weak. What would I do with it? I'd make it like my team, which is I'd probably downgrade one of Salah, Palmer, or Haaland and spread the funds around. But I wanted to show you that it's feasible and your draft will still look pretty good. Like I don't look at this and go, oh, I would never do that. It still looks strong. I just think that all you need, let's say Ryan Ait-Nouri absolutely pops off at the start of the season. Kirkes nails down the left-back role. Frimpong nails down the right-back role. Gvardiol picks up bonus points for fun. Gabriel scores a couple of Imagine all that. And again, this is a very sensationalized version of what could happen. But if the premium defenders start popping off, you're looking at either an early wildcard, or you then have to use multiple transfers to downgrade one of Salah, Palmer, Haaland, then multiple transfers to spread the funds back into the defence. So I just think you're not leaving yourself in a particularly flexible spot in the defence. On the flip side, and it's the final thing I'll note on this draft, it leaves you very flexible in the attack. One thing which I used to do, which I don't always do now, is I used to try and own the most expensive defender, the most expensive midfielder, and the most expensive forward. So that would be any of the £6 million defenders, Salah and Haaland. The reason I always used to do that is I always used to say, if you start with the most expensive player in that position, you can buy anyone you want. You would have to obviously sell that expensive player, but it leaves you able to get anyone in one move. So by having Salah, Palmer, and Haaland, just by selling one of them, it frees up so much money for you to sort of spread around. Whereas others that have already spread the money, selling one player might not do as much for them. So yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons to this draft from FPL_Dandy. Thank you for sending it in. It's definitely something different. It's probably a bit much for me. I think you bite the bullet, you pick 2 premiums out of Salah, Palmer, Haaland, maybe Isak, who we'll discuss in a second, Saka. You pick 2 of them, and then you spread the money around elsewhere and have a really strong 15. So for draft number 3 is the talk of the town, Bench Boost Game Week 1. I released a video a few days ago talking through this. I said I'm very much on the fence, but probably not at that moment in time leaning towards it. As of right now, a bit of a spoiler alert for when you get my next draft, it's almost definitely going to have a Game Week 1 Bench Boost because that's where I'm currently at. I think it's very, very close, but you're probably going to play this first Bench Boost in a single game week anyway. Why not play it in a week where you can change all of your players right up until the deadline, get it out the way nice and early. When you then wildcard, you can wildcard the money out of your bench. You can take the money out when other people will have to add to it. And I know people say there are uncertainties, but there are uncertainties in every game week. And you know, this is for a fact, this will not cost you any hits and any transfers to build towards the bench boost because you can't use them, right? If you say I'm on a bench boost in game week 12, unless you're wildcarding the week before, and then again, you have to wildcard with a strong bench, who knows what issues might come up before then. So I am starting to actually lean back towards a game week 1 bench boost. But the reason I want to show you this one is it's a Salahless one because Salahless is a funny one. I uploaded a draft a few days ago, which was a bench boost game week 1, and it had Salah in. And lots of people, and I can understand it, they said, Ross, surely if you're on bench boost 1, what you do is you go without Salah. So you go no Salah, spread the money around a lot more, and then you wildcard around game week 4 when Salah goes on that nicer fixture run, when he gets those first 3 fixtures out the way, which don't look that ideal. Spread the money, have 3 good weeks with a really strong squad, and then wildcard Salah back in before he can do serious damage. I honestly really, really like it. I'm rating this draft at 87%, and it's the first time that myself and the Hub algorithm agree. They've also rated it at 87%. So to read out the draft, it's Areola in goal with Sells on the bench. So the 2 goalkeepers really, really strong. The 5 defenders are then Gvardiol, Van Dijk, Tarkowski, Nico Williams, and De Cowper of Brighton. So you've got 5 really good defenders. Then the midfield is Marmoush, Saka, Palmer, Kudus, Elanga. Your cheapest midfielder there is Kudus, then Elanga. Then you've got 2 premiums and Marmoush in sort of, I'll call him like a mid-price premium. You could easily switch out Marmoush here for Florian Wirtz or something like that. Or if you want to go for a United midfielder for some reason, whatever that is, you could go there as well. And then the front 3 is Beto, Bowen, and Solanke. Now, you might look at that and go, oh, Beto's a bit of a weak spot. But assuming you think he'll start against Leeds in game week 1, you can then just rotate him out. You've got Elanga sat on your bench as well. You've got 5 defenders. If you want to play 4 at the back one week, you can do it. That is such a strong all-round squad. Like, there aren't any real cheap players there, but it doesn't feel like you're missing out. The only thing you're missing out on is obviously both Haaland and Salah, but you're bench boosting. So even if they do pop off, you sort of make some of the immediate points back a little bit. I really, really like this. I'm struggling to criticize it too much, other than just saying you are forcing an early wildcard. So the reason that I'm not rating this higher is I think Haaland and Salah are the 2 most expensive players for a reason. So I think the reason they're so expensive is because they'll get the most points. So you're missing out on the 2 players that probably will get up there with some of the most points over the first 6 to 8. And again, you're forcing that early wildcard. I don't mind an early wildcard. I've wildcarded early in multiple seasons, 2, 3, 4, I've done it. But I never try to plan for it or force myself into it. And I feel like a draft like this means that you've got no chance of holding out. I'm going to have a bit of a discussion with Praz on FPL Therapy. Look at the tone of that. My podcast for this season is back. So check out FPL Therapy on all platforms. Praz is my first guest. That will be released on Saturday morning. So keep an eye out for that. I know that Praz is looking at a wild card in 13, and he has some seriously good justification. I've spoken to him. I've watched his video on the FPL Wire. Game week 13 does look like the best time to wildcard. I think by a reasonable distance. And I think as a result, yeah, you might gain in game week 1 the bench boost. You might then early wildcard and gain some points. But I think game week 13 will swing around. And I think you're going to be really regretting that you forced yourself into that early wildcard. So I don't mind a game week 1 bench boost. I think a game week 1 bench boost makes a lot of sense. But for me, I would try and build a game week 1 bench boost squad where you're not forcing yourself into a wildcard in the first few weeks. And I think you can do that. And hopefully I'll be able to show you that next week with my draft. So yeah, a really solid draft, 87%. Let me know what you think of bench boost game week 1. Let me know if you are currently on that right now. So guys, draft 4 of 6, I've called the anti-big boys draft. And in all honesty, it's very similar in concept to draft number 3. It's going without Salah and Haaland. But in draft number 3, the reason that you went without Salah and Haaland was because you wanted to build a bench boost and you wanted to spread the money. And having Salah and Palmer and maybe a Haaland in there, it's just not possible to really spread the money around and also still have some decent picks in there. With this draft, there is no Salah and there's no Haaland, but it's not for bench boost purposes. It's to allow you to get 3 of the other premiums in this case, Saka, Palmer, Isak, but then also to have some sort of semi-premiums in there in the form of Wirtz and Watkins. So you're omitting the 2 best players in the game, but you're doing so to try and have just such a strong 11 outside of that. Because if you look at the bench, it's not as strong, it's not as fantastic. So the draft reads Pickford in goal. Then it's a back 3 of Porro, Munoz, Wan-Bissaka, a midfield 4 of Saka, Palmer, Ndiaye, and Florian Wirtz, and then a front 3 of Watkins, Welbeck, and Isak. The bench is Darlow, Baleba, Concert, and Estev. So it's not an awful bench. It's definitely better than I've seen a lot of people. That would, for me, be suitable enough. So I'm not gonna say the bench is too weak on this occasion. We get to draft 4 and I'm okay with that. I like a couple of the picks in here. There's something slightly different. And there's a couple of players that I want to discuss. But starting with the goalkeeper, I think Pickford's great. I know he's the most expensive player in the game. Goalkeeper in the game. But rightly so, right? 2 seasons in a row, he's been the top scoring goalkeeper. He deserves to be up there at 5.5. He still will probably make a lot of saves and be up there as one of the top scorers. I wouldn't pick him, though, personally. Because I just think now that he is up at 5.5, and the fact that you've got the likes of Sanchez and Sells at 5... I think there are enough good £5 million goalkeepers that I want to go there. Or you just cheap out all the way and go for someone like a Kelleher or a Verbruggen or an Areola. So for me, Pickford is a little bit too expensive for me to want him, but he probably is the right value. Pedro Porro is an interesting one because I think he would suit Thomas Frank's system, but there are rumours going around that he's almost going to play like a back four, right, but with 3 centre-backs as such, or 3 very defensive players that sit there, and then one of the players is the one that bombs on. If that's the case, it's Porro, Udogie, and Spence, unless he prefers one of them as a centre-back, but really I think all 3 of them would be better in a more advanced role. So I just think there's going to be too much rotation for his price. So I probably wouldn't go there. Munoz I love. I think he's very, very underrated. And then Wan-Bissaka, I've sort of slightly gone off just because if it wasn't Sunderland in game week 1, and I know it is, but I'm saying if that fixture was in like game week 3, no one would be looking. It's just like you want a really good player for game week 1, which is fair. But I think beyond game week 1, you wouldn't look at it and think, I'm so glad I've got Wan-Bissaka in my team. I would rather, again, have Konsa, who's on the bench, is great, I think. Fixtures look really good. Chris Richards, another player that, again, I think will be really good for the defensive contributions. Fixtures start to improve. So I think there are other 4.5s that I would probably slightly prefer. De Cowper at Brighton, I think, could look really, really good this season. I think Florian Wirtz is a player that I'm going back and forth on. If you want to spread money around to bench boost or just to have a really strong team, it's difficult to get, obviously not in this case, but Salah, Palmer, and Wirtz in there, as well as having a really strong squad. So I've dropped him out of my last couple of drafts, but I really like it. And then the front 3 is interesting. So Ollie Watkins and Morgan Rogers, they're just not shiny new toys. The only thing that I can think of, 2 things, that might lead to people really underrating them. And I know their overall ownership isn't that bad on the game. It's quite high, but just in drafts in the community, like if you're active on social media, if you look on YouTube, not as many people have Rogers in particular, but Watkins. 2 things. They're not shiny new toys, and also it's Newcastle. Now, it is at home, and we know how good they are at home, but it's just like, it's not the ideal first fixture. But if you look beyond that, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. In fact, I can actually show you, we go over to Fantasy Football Hub here. I've just sorted the fixtures by the first 8 game weeks. You can only see the first 7 there, and then just sorted it by overall. They're top. If you sort it by attack, they're still top as well. So if we're looking at fixture difficulty, doesn't get much better. So after Newcastle, it's Brentford, Crystal Palace, Everton, Sunderland, Fulham, Burnley, Spurs. It's a great run. Again, I know this is almost a silly thing to say, but if Newcastle was in game 3 and it was Palace, Brentford, Newcastle, I feel like more people would have Morgan Rogers and Ollie Watkins in their team. So I look at the pair of them, I think, yeah, they're not shiny new toys. And yeah, do you know what? They have had a bit of a price increase, but they're probably still assets that we should consider. So I've been looking at trying to get them into my team. I'll be honest, I'm struggling with Watkins right now due to his price, but Morgan Rogers at 7 million. He might end up back in my team this year. I feel like he could have another good season. And the thing is, you have to remember about Rogers in particular, and I know Rogers isn't even in this draft, but while we're on him, he's young and he can improve. He's not at his ceiling by any means. So you might say, oh yeah, but last year he only got this many points, so he didn't get that many goals, but he can always improve upon that. And Ollie Watkins is just so consistent. I saw a stat, I wasn't able to verify, I forgot, but I think it said that Watkins has more points than Haaland across the last 2 seasons. Even if that's not directly true, it's at least close. You know what I mean? He's right up there, and he puts up pretty good numbers. So yeah, I love the pair of them. Danny Welbeck pops up again. I think that's just the price point. It's very difficult to get all of these expensive players in. You have to go a little bit cheap somewhere. And then at Isak. So I'm recording this to timestamp it about 10 p.m. on Thursday, the 24th of July. So Thursday evening for a Friday morning upload. The news as of Thursday is that Isak has asked to leave Newcastle, or has made it clear that he's open to leave. By the sounds of it, he's not said, I'm never turning up ever again, you've got to sell me. He's not throwing a full-blown tantrum, but it sounds like he said he wants to leave. It sounds like there are 2 options. I think a team in Saudi has offered a large sum for him, but apparently he's not in direct talks with them. It was just the sum was offered. And then Liverpool. And apparently, if Liverpool sell Luis Diaz and do a bit of rejigging of the funds, as well as Ekatike, they can afford Isak. That will be a very interesting one. If he stays at Newcastle, which seems unlikely now, he's always fantastic, we know that. If he moves to Liverpool, I've left this draft in because I still like it. I really do. In fact, I think it would be really interesting, the dynamic of a Liverpool attack with Isak in it, because does Wirtz do the creativity? Who gets all the goals? Is it Isak? Is it Salah? I can't see Salah getting a 50% plus return rate. I think he was involved in like 50-something% of Liverpool's goals last season. Surely he can't keep that up with all of these other fantastic attackers. So it's going to be really interesting. Like, imagine a front 4 of like Ekatike, Wirtz, Isak and Salah with Gakpo coming off the bench. It's remarkably good. Or Gakpo starting with Ekatike coming. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying is it's going to be really interesting if Isak does go to Liverpool, how that affects Salah, how that affects Wirtz, and how that affects Isak as a pick himself. He probably wouldn't have penalties, which is a major loss for him. but maybe his output would be slightly higher because he's playing in such good attack. But then again, would the goals be shared around? This is a really terrible, terrible section. I've talked about Morgan Rogers, who isn't in the draft, and Isak, who hasn't even had an offer from Liverpool yet. But anyway, I think this is a really nice draft. Back to it. I've given it 85%. Fantasy Football Hub prefer it slightly more with 89%. But I struggle to give it too many. I struggle to have too much criticism of it because I think in general it's a very strong draft. If you're willing to go without Salah and Haaland, which is a massive risk. So let's move on to draft number 5. So guys, moving on to draft number 5 of 6. I've called this 4-4-2 Deichborn. It's really the conversation I want to have is around a 4 at the back. I've had a lot of people asking me, is it viable to go for 4 really solid defenders? Because they are just generally cheaper, right? 6 million is the most expensive. When you look at attackers, there aren't any good 6 million attackers, really. Whereas you can get the best defenders in the game. So it kind of makes sense. Why would you not go for 4 really solid defenders? And then you only have to invest your money in 6 attackers, right? 6 rather than 7 or 8 that some other people are doing. And then you go for 2 4.5 attackers. Why would you not do that? And when I frame it that way, I kind of get it, right? It makes sense. I'll be honest, I'm a hater. I am. I'm a hater of this strategy because I'm all about flexibility and trying to give yourself as many options moving forwards. And again, you'll keep hearing me saying pre-season, you don't want to force yourself into early hits or force yourself into an early wildcard. And when I look at this right now, unbelievable starting 11, super, super strong. Terrible bench, but not only a terrible bench, you've only got 6 attackers. So let's say, hypothetically, the 6 attackers you've got absolutely smash it, but then there are more attackers that you want to buy. You can't buy them really because you've got your sort of core 6 and your other 2 are so cheap that you can't upgrade them or invest any money into those spots. So you've got less options in terms of what you can do with your front sort of attackers. So that's the issue that I have with it. Let's say loads of really good 6.5. Let's say, I don't know, Kudus and Ndiaye look really good and so does Cunha and him. But like, where are you going? Because you've lost 2 of your attackers immediately off the bat because you've got no money invested in them. So the draft to read out is Kelleher in goal, so cheap goalkeeper. But then it's Cucurella, Gvardiol, Ola Aina and Gabriel. Cucurella, Gvardiol, Gabriel, you start every single week comfortably. And honestly, considering Forest fixtures and how they've defended across the last 2 seasons, you probably start Ola Aina each week anyway. That is a set of 4 defenders that you really are just happy playing almost indefinitely. Because even in the difficult fixtures, they might be more likely to get defensive contribution points. So it's really nice. And then what that means is not only have you got that insanely strong 4 at the back, but because, again, you're only investing in 6 attackers, you've got Marmoush, Salah, Palmer, Rogers, João Pedro, Evanilson. Like, what a front 6 that is. The concern for me would be that then when you look at the bench, it's Kinski, Esteve, Carvalho and Marshall, which is just a little bit weak in general. You'd probably want to get Carvalho up. I mean, maybe to a 5.5, but ideally you'd want to go even higher than that. You'd probably want to go to a Hudson-Odoi or a Minte. And if you could do that, then wow. Then yeah, that is a strong squad. But you'd have to find 1 million. Now, how could you do that? You could downgrade Marmoush, which by the way isn't bad. Marmoush to a 7.5 or a 7. Marmoush to even a Marmoush to an Iliman Ndiaye or a Kudus, someone like that. That frees up 2 million. Upgrade the bench a little bit and you're looking great. Carvalho up to, again, a 6 to a 6.5, a Hudson-Odoi. And all of a sudden, not only is it a 4 at the back, but you've also then got a 7th attacker that you can rotate in. So yeah, I'm not going to hate too much. Maybe 80% is a little bit harsh when I made this graphic, but I wouldn't go as high as Fantasy Football Hub's 93% rating. Like I said, do make sure... By the way, upload, if you're still watching at this point, hopefully some people are, upload your team to Fantasy Football Hub and let me know what your rating is. Let me know. I think the highest I've managed to get on one of my drafts was 94%. So if you can beat 94%, let me know down below. This one's rated very highly. I can kind of understand it. Let's move on to the final draft, number 6. So the 6th and final draft I've called Defense First. It was sent in by Tonali FPL, and it's basically going all in on the new defensive contribution points. So if for some reason this is the first piece of preseason content you've watched, firstly, welcome. Please do consider subscribing. And if you've got to this point, anyone, and you've still not subscribed, you've watched most of the video, please do consider subscribing. I would really, really appreciate it. But if this is the first piece of content you've watched, essentially, defenders, if they get 10 plus clearances, blocks, interceptions, and tackles in a single game, so 10 of those combined, they get 2 points, and it's capped at 2. So no matter how many you get, you can only get 2. For midfielders and forwards, it's clearances, blocks, interceptions, recoveries, and tackles. So you add the R in, which is CBIRT or RIT, and you have to get 12 plus of those. So it's the same as defenders, but additional ball recoveries, and you have to get 12 rather than 10, and you would pick up 2 FPL points. Why that is important is that all of a sudden makes midfielders that have a lot of defensive actions possible options, and it makes centre-backs unbelievable in comparison to full-backs. Like, centre-backs have had such a massive bump now. It's why the likes of Tarkowski and Murillo are so expensive. FPL have tried to account for the desire now to pick centre-backs. Also, the bonus point system has changed. Rather than having net successful tackles now, which was successful minus unsuccessful, contributing in the bonus, it's now just tackles won. So every time you win a tackle, you gain in the bonus points. So again, centre-backs and defensive midfielders will also be better for bonus. So I really genuinely think the likes of Tarkowski, Murillo, Van Dijk, Anderson, Caicedo that are in this draft, Baleba, these are all players that are going to pick up more points. We saw actually Caicedo bumped up to like 140, 150 points last season if he'd have picked up the 42-odd defensive contribution points that he would have had. Tarkowski gained 44. I think Anderson, Murillo are both over 35 as well, defensive contribution points they would have picked up last season. I think all four of those, Murillo, Anderson, and Caicedo, are all going to be really good. Anderson, though, in particular, is probably sneaky one of the best sub £6 million midfielders. Shout out to Baker from Above Average, because I actually read one of his articles on Patreon just before I come on to do this video. But Anderson could and should be on a lot more set pieces. He was already on some, but obviously with Elanga now being gone, he's potentially going to take all set pieces. And in the past in his career, he's got attacking returns. We're not talking about a player here that literally will just sit back and have no attacking ability. He can strike a ball, so you might get goals and assists. Again, last season, he was only beat by Caicedo for defensive contribution points. He would have been anyway, in the midfield role. And he's got really good opening fixtures as well. There are probably more reasons to pick him too. So I think sneaky thing Anderson of Nottingham Forest could end up being one of the better picks. So yeah, you've got all of these players here, but then you've still got Salah, Palmer, Wood, João Pedro, Watkins. So why have I given this 82%? Honestly, in hindsight, looking at this is not an 82% draft. I gave this rating last night when I was making the graphics. Like, this is probably a 90% rated draft. The reason I think I went 82 is I thought it's just a bit overboard. Like, so you've got Salah and Palmer in the midfield here, and then you've got Anderson, Caicedo, and Baleba. 3 players that are just there, really, for defensive contributions. This is a bit much. I think I would replace Caicedo with someone like, I don't know, a Dingra or Minte. I would try and pick a player in there that also carries attacking threat. Just to, even for your own just sake of enjoying the game. I don't think you want just defensive mids there. So maybe slightly overboard, but I think Tarkowski, Murillo, and Van Dijk are fantastic. I think Anderson's great. Baleba is a cheap one on the bench. Even Caicedo's fine, but I just think pick 1 or 2 of them. And then that front 3 of Wood, João Pedro, Watkins, I really like too. I'm going to discuss defensive contributions more over the coming weeks because, again, the more I think about it, the more I think we are probably not giving it enough thought and consideration how important it could be. The only final thing I'll say on defensive contribution points is a little sneak peek of what is going to be coming up in the content. Someone made a really good point, and I can't find the original tweet that made me think about this. But they said defensive contribution points will come in games where the team is getting dominated or it's like a tricky fixture. Tarkowski's probably not going to make 10 plus clearances, I say this now, against Sunderland or Leeds. You wouldn't imagine as much as maybe an Arsenal or a City where they're spending the whole game defending. So more likely than not, when they pick up the defensive contribution points, most of them will probably come in the more difficult fixtures. They'll still get them in other fixtures, of course. They're probably the fixtures that you'll often rotate those players out. Like if Tarkowski had Man City away, you'd probably bench him, but that might be when he picks up the defensive contribution points. So inherently, you might not actually, unless you're just picking a player every week, like, I don't know, Gabriel, you'll just start him every week. But if you're picking a player that you're rotating in and out, you might end up rotating them out for the fixture that you'd actually want them in because they pick up those points. So maybe that's something else to think about. The only other thing as well, with defensive contribution points, you're looking over a long period of time. Like, the highest last season was Tarkowski with 44. That's about, obviously just over, it's about 1 point per game week. So if you're going to wildcard in game week 4 and you're picking Tarkowski because of defensive contribution points, you might get really lucky and you might get 8. But you're talking about, I think, season keepers and sticking to a philosophy of picking centre-backs that pick up these points, that makes sense. But saying I'm going to go for Murillo for defensive contribution points, but I'm wildcarding in game week 5, 6, 7, it doesn't make much sense because you're not got much upside there. I'd much rather pick a defender that could score a goal, like Milenkovic. I'd rather pick Milenkovic than Murillo because he also is good for those points, but he can also score a goal too. Hopefully that makes sense, but I basically think these points are more useful to think about in the long term as a philosophy for picking players, rather than saying I'm going to pick this player for a 3-game week period because of that. Because the ceiling just isn't high enough. Right, that was a very rambly section. I like the defense first draft. I'm going to rescind my 82% I put on this graphic and instead give it like a 90%. I agree with Fantasy Football Hub. Let me know what you think, and let me know in your team right now, how many centre-backs are in your defence, and have you picked any midfielders purely for defensive contributions, and if so, who are they? So guys, there you have it. That is rating your drafts. 6 slightly different drafts. They're talking about what I like in terms of the structure, the players, and how I could potentially improve them as well, in my very, very humble opinion. If you have enjoyed today's video, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe. As well as subscribing and liking 2 other things, please do check out Fantasy Football Hub. There is a link down below to get 50% off. It's just worth checking out. You might decide that you don't like it, but I think you will. It's got so many cool features. And also keep an eye out for FPL Therapy going live on Saturday morning with Praz, which is, again, my podcast, FPL Therapy. Check it out on all platforms. Praz and I are going to have a really in-depth discussion about chip strategy, the opening fixtures, and we'll also reveal our latest drafts as well. Thank you for watching to this point. I appreciate you so much. Until next time, bye-bye.